Okay, in this video I'm going to talk about constructors. So let's first go to an introduction to constructors. Let me just fix this up here. Okay. So what we have here is an employee class. As you see in the employee class, there's two attributes it's interested in: last name and hourly wage. Now notice these are the declarations. Both of these are private. For object-oriented programming, we want to keep the attributes private. This is a string, so last name is a string, and this is a number. Hourly wage is a number. And here we have four different methods. And basically all these methods do is set the name, set the hourly wage, get the last name, get the hourly wage. And so if you look here, these are public. Public void means it returns nothing. Set last name, and they pass in a name. That name then goes into last name, and this is stored up here. Then we just return. Public void, it returns nothing. Set hourly wage, the wage comes in, and we set the hourly wage and store it here. We then have a string called get last name. It passes nothing, but it returns a string. So return last name. In public, we return a number. Get hourly wage, we don't pass anything, but we return a number. And that ends the class. So this is all we're interested in as far as an employee goes: their last name and their hourly wage. All we did is we abstracted from everything we could have about an employee, and we only care about these methods and these attributes. Again, notice the methods are public, the attributes are private. So this is kind of a class. It encapsulates the data and methods that we care about for an employee. Okay, going on. One of the things that we want to talk about now are called constructors. And these are special types of methods. These are the methods that create, instantiate, establish, whatever word you want to use, an object. And to do a method, a constructor, what it does is when it creates the object, it reserves space on my computer in memory to store what we had right here: the last name and the hourly wage and the employee. And if you remember the that variable, it knows where it stored it. And so when I give this object a name, it's going to say, okay, that's stored over here. And we'll see that in an example in a little bit. And for the most part, constructor is created automatically by the compiler for every class. You don't have to create it. However, most of the time you will. But if you don't, it's automatically created for you. And how do we do a constructor? Well, first off, we want to declare an employee object. A constructor takes the employee class and then creates an object saying, okay, here are your attributes, last name and hourly wage, and here are your methods with it. So that's what it does, and creates the object. The object can use those methods, and it stores things in the attributes. As I said, you can write your own constructor. If you want to write your own constructor, you can go ahead and do it, and you can pass variables with it. You can put additional tasks in it, and we'll show one with additional tasks that we want to do. What a constructor does is it has the same name as the class. So if I have an employee class, the constructor is called employee. Unlike most methods, the constructor has no return type, and that includes void. It doesn't have void, it doesn't have anything. They're always public, but they don't have any return type. And it says you can place anywhere inside the class as long as it's not within a method already in the class. I usually put the constructors right after the attributes. Why? Because that's usually the first, and it is the first thing when you create an object, the first method you're going to run. So here's our employee. You see in the highlighted blue, here is our employee constructor. Here's everything else as it was before. Employee, employee, so it has the same name as the class, no return type, and it's always public. And in this constructor, the person said, set hourly wage to 10. And then just return. So however you use it, this constructor, the hourly wage is always going to be set to 10. So it's going to come down here. Oops, here we go. Set hourly wage. 10 is going to be in there. It's going to be 10 in there. And it's just going to set it to 10. So here we go. Here's my employee, my personal trainer. So I have a class employee. Here's my object. I call it my personal trainer. Here's employee, my interior decorator. These are two different objects of the same class employee. I can create as many objects as I want from a class. And this is using the constructor. So it says output trainer's wage. And to output it, I use the object dot the method. So the object name is my personal trainer dot get hourly wage. And then the output decorator's wage. And then again, object my interior decorator dot get hourly wage. And both of those to get hourly wage, all it does is return the hourly wage, which is right up here stored. And they're stored in two different places. They're stored in my memory in two different places. So here's trainer's wage 10, decorator's wage 10. So let's look at, let me just get out of here for a second. Let's look at a real program. Now this is a program that was done in C#. Again, you don't really have to understand how C# works, but let's here is our employee class. Again, I have last name, hourly wage, and I put another thing up here, weekly pay. And so set last name. Okay, so I bring in the name, I set the last name and return. Set hourly wage. I set the wage. And here I'm doing a little calculation. I want to make sure the wage is between $6 and $70. So if the wage is less than the minimum wage, less than $6, I set it to $6. Else if the wage is greater than the maximum, which is 70, I set it to the maximum, which is 70. Else hourly wage is just equal to wage. And then I say, okay, calculate pay. And here, where's calculate pay? There it is at the bottom. So I say work week hours is a constant 40. I take the hourly wage and multiply it by 40. I get the weekly pay and I put it up here. Notice how I don't have a constructor here. Why? It's because the compiler, the software, automatically creates one. And what it looks like is just, let me put it in here. It's going to look exactly like this. Public. And again, no return type, employee. Boom. And that's it. That's the constructor. And if I put it in here, the one that's in the background automatically goes away. But I just duplicate exactly what you would get if you did not write a constructor. This is called a default constructor because nothing's passed to it. It's just no parameters passed to it, so it's a default constructor. Now I could put some things in here like, I don't know. I could put, last name always equals Smith or something like that, and it would work. So let's look at the program. How do I set up two objects? So in C#, again, here's employee name and wage. Employee, here's my object. My secretary equals new employee. That's how you do it in C#. I think it's very similar in Java. Here's the class name, the object name, new, and here's the constructor. Class name, object name, my gardener. New is just a keyword, and my constructor. That creates the objects. So I created two different objects. They're stored in two different places on my computer. Now, if you look at here, I say my secretary, which is my object, dot set last name, Johnson. So basically, I'm going and saying, where's set last name up here? Here, set last name, Johnson. So name is Johnson, goes into last name. Let's go back here. My second set hourly wage, 15.25. So if we go here, set hourly wage, 15.25, I'll see that it's greater than the min, so I skip over this. It's less than the max, so I skip over this, and 15.25 will go into hourly wage. Then I'll jump down to calculate pay, and I'll calculate the 15.25 times 40, and I'll put it up here. And that's all for secretary object. It has nothing to do with the gardener object. So let's just run that much of it. So I started, and I'm going to break it up when I get into the wage. So as far as I've gone, if I look at last name, yep, it's set to Johnson. If I see that, there's Johnson. Hourly wage and weekly pay is still 0 because I did not set that yet. And so if I look at wage, there's the 15.25. You can see it down here, 15.25. Let's just step through this a little bit. So it's greater than the min. It's less than the max. So hourly wage is going to be set to wage, which is 15.25. So if I look up here now, it should be set to 15.25. Yep, it is. Last name still Johnson, 15.25. Okay, so now we're going to calculate the weekly pay. So it jumps down to calculate weekly pay. It says, okay, weekly pay is going to be hourly wages, 15.25 times 40. And that turns out to be 610. So I've put 610 up here. 610. Now, one of the things to remember in a class, since these are not under any method, they're available throughout the whole class. They're class variables. They're good throughout the whole class. Once they're put right under the class, I can use them anywhere within the class. They're defined within the class. Now, if you look at such things as min wage and max wage, which are defined under this method only, these are only available within the method. Once I leave the method, they're no longer available. Same thing with work week hours. That's only available within this method. Once I leave this method, it's no longer there. But these not in a method, right under the class name, are available throughout the whole method. So as you see, I set for my secretary, Johnson. She makes $15.25 an hour, and her weekly pay is $610. Okay, so let's go back. And here we go. So we'll go back there, return. So we're back here. I just jumped to that method and came back. The next thing I want to do is enter the name of the gardener. I'm going to put the name in. I'll read it in from the console. And I'll set the last name. I'll enter the gardener's hourly wages, read that from the console, and set that. Then we will put out, and once I do that, you'll see that, again, when we set his hourly wage, he's going to have different values in the attribute than the secretary did. So let's just continue from here. Okay, what's the name of the gardener? I'll just say Smith. What's his hourly wage? I don't know. We'll say $12.35. Okay, so now we stop. Go down. And if I look up here, it's no longer Johnson, it's now Smith, because it's the gardener we're talking about. His hourly wage is not set yet, but I do know it's $12.35. So if I start stepping through this, I'll set the wage now to $12.35. Now I'll go to weekly pay. Okay, so 40, and it's $12.35. So the weekly pay becomes $4.94. So we got Smith, $12.35, and he makes $4.94 a week. Now, if you look at that, these are all for the gardener. I still have stored somewhere in memory the secretary object, but these are all the gardener objects now. So let's now continue and finish this. So we'll get back here, return. And so here's my gardener stuff. So just to show you, I'm going to say, okay, get the weekly pay of the secretary. And so it's going to write out my secretary makes, $, whatever the weekly pay is, and then it's going to put per week. So get weekly pay. If I look up here, Johnson, 15.25, and her weekly pay is $610. or his weekly pay is 610. Get weekly pay. So that was the object for my secretary. And if you look here, didn't come up yet. So I have to do one more line. Boom. Now it should be up there. There, my secretary makes $610 per week. Now we're going to go into the gardener object. So we'll go into the gardener object to get weekly pay. And if I look up here, last name is Smith, hourly wage is $12.35, and the weekly pay is $494 a week. So I'll get their weekly pay, and I'll print that out. And there's my secretary makes $610 per week. My gardener makes $494 per week. And that does it. So, and if you look again, here's creating two objects, my secretary and my gardener, different attributes. They use the same methods, but they have different attributes, and they're stored in different places in the program. And again, here is my default parameter, which created the constructor, which created the objects, public employee. If you don't put it in there, it automatically is created by the computer itself. Okay, so let's go on a little bit. And we'll go over this again on Wednesday night. So, constructors from current slide. We can also create constructors that have parameters. And they can have different values. We can instantiate them to have different values. For example, in this case, you see, we can have a constructor which passes a rate. And that would set the hourly wage by the rate. So this is an employee constructor, public, there's no return, same as the class name, rate, and it passes a number, and it's going to set the hourly wage. So it passes a numeric value to the constructor. We can also overload methods, and if you recall, overloading means you have the same name, but you have different parameters. So I can have one constructor, this employee with a rate, and set the hourly rate, and I can have another constructor with nothing in it, and it just sets the hourly rate to 10 all the time. Which one is used? Depends on how you set up the constructor. If you have your constructor in your code with no parameters, it's automatically, when it compiles, takes this one. If you're going to set up your constructor with a parameter, it'll automatically take that one. And let's see, here's one, delivery person. This is how they set it up in the 117 class. Not quite the way C# or Java does it. But in this one, employee delivery person is the object, employee is the class, no parameter, so it's going to use the constructor with no parameter. It's going to set it to 10 automatically. Employee my butler is the object, it's going to have 25.85 with it. So this is employee 25.85, it's going to set that as the hourly wage. Now let's just go back out of here for a second. Let's go back to the code. If you wanted to do it in Java or C#, what you would do is right here, I could put the hourly rate and let's put it in. Let's say I'm going to pass. Now let's create another constructor. So we have that constructor there. Let's create another constructor. Public employee. And we're going to get, call it double. Let's just call it wage. And then I will go this route and say hourly wage equals wage. And that should do it. Okay. So now I have two constructors. It's overloaded. One is just employee, one's employee, double with wage. So now let's go back to the program. And over here, I'm going to say, okay, right here. Instead of putting the 15.25 there, I'll put it for my secretary. 15.25. And so we'll just get rid of this line. I can get rid of it by just commenting out. It's green is commented out. So let's run from there. And basically, let's put a breakpoint right here. So debug, toggle breakpoint, start, boom. So now we're here. We're going to create a My Secretary object. And we're going to say, okay, so I'm using the constructor employee, but I have a number in it. So let's go. Oh, okay, it called the employee with the double wage. It set the hourly wage. And here it goes. Yep, 15.25. That's what it was. And now we're going to create a gardener one. Nothing there. So it goes to the first one, employee, and I have nothing there. It's not going to set anything. So now we'll finish up setting up Johnson. And we'll just continue. Well, we'll finish this first. And I missed it. Oh well. And the gardener. And we'll call him Smith. Okay. And we'll just continue. And I did something wrong. Okay, so I did something wrong. But anyway, you see how the constructors went to the right one on it. Let me stop the whole program, see if I can start it up again. See if I do it right this time. Oh, I know why it didn't work. Because here I do calculate weekly pay, and since I didn't go through set hourly wage for my secretary, it never calculated the weekly pay. So let's just put the weekly pay, calculate weekly pay right here. So let's go calculate weekly pay. Okay. There we go. Boom. So now let's try it. Okay. And we'll continue. Smith. Hopefully this will work now. And his weekly pay is 77. Okay, so now if we look here, we're on Smith and we're doing all his stuff. Continue. And there it is. My secretary makes $610 per week, and my gardener makes $510.80 per week. So that's constructors. I'm showing you, you can overload constructors. You can pass parameters of constructors. This is called a default constructor. You do not have to put it in. And as soon as you write one constructor, the one that's placed automatically in there by the computer goes away. It no longer exists. So as soon as you create one, it no longer exists. So that's constructors. Again, we'll talk more about it on Wednesday night. If you have any questions, hold them for Wednesday night or put them on the message board or send them to me by email. And we'll talk to you later. Thank you. Bye.